All right. Welcome, everyone, to Sales Hacks with Xactly. This is our fifth episode of this series. As you all know, I'm Ryan Maggio, VP of North America Sales here at Xactly. I'm super excited to have Bayley and Annie on, our in-house RevOps power duo, where we're going to be really talking today about how sales works with RevOps, how we go about forecasting, changes they're seeing in the market, anything. I'm sure we'll hear, with Bayley and Annie coming from Adobe and Marketo and everything else. We'll hear some history there. But what I call the team Banny, want to let them introduce themselves before we get started here. So Bayley, if you want to go first.
Sure. I'm Bayley. I'm the Director of Revenue Operations here at Xactly, and I think I just crossed the 6-month threshold, so I don't really get to say that I'm new here anymore. But as Ryan mentioned, I previously worked at Adobe and Marketo for most of my career, so it's been super fun to step into this role at Xactly and apply some of those learnings.
I'm Annie. I'm the Revenue Operations Business Partner. I've been here since the beginning of December, so still pretty new. But yeah, like Bayley, I came from the Marketo and Adobe world. So it's been a lot of fun working a smaller environment. We've kind of hit the ground running.
We definitely interesting times, to say the least. Question one, we'll start with Bayley. We'll go reverse alphabetical order because E comes after A. So anyways, Bayley, I know you have a strategy for enhancing RevOps and what it has to do with people, process, and technology. Tell me more about that. What are you doing? How can it help the business? What have you done even here at Xactly in your 6 months or so in the seat?
Yeah, so in my mind, RevOps is about people, process, and technology. You kind of have to have, it's like a three-legged stool. You have to have all the legs of that chair to be fully up and running. So as a RevOps leader, I care about figuring out where the sales process isn't making sense or where we maybe have some extra hangups and just making it easier to do business with Xactly. Anything I can do to make business easier to do with Xactly impacts the customer experience and can increase the volume and velocity of our sales organization and our go-to-market. Really, RevOps, we're the only group that works cross-functionally across the entire lead to cash motion in most organizations. So we get some insight that other groups might not have from their lens. So it's been really fun to jump in and try to pinpoint ways we can simplify things, whether that's, in the quote to cash and CPQ, whether there's other things we could be doing up front if we're duplicating efforts, collecting information anywhere, just really making sure that we're aligned to the go-to-market strategy in the sales motion. Because as you know, Ryan, as we talk about often, no one tool is going to solve a problem. We have to have a strategy behind usage of any tool across the process.
And we buy or try all new tools while you're on PTO. So this way,
yes,
I don't get told no. I think that one of the things that we've talked about in your time working together is, facts don't have feelings, and how do we leverage that to make better enhancements, whether it's the processes, technology, whatever that may be. What are your, I don't know, Annie or Bayley, which one you want to take that one, but how do you delineate between the difference between data and facts?
Yeah,
I think data sort of.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, I think data sort of informs the facts, right? We can look at it, and if you have data behind something, you can say this is sort of an objective point of view. So it's sort of one precedes the other.
Yeah, and I think Chris has said it before, but data, it's a data point. I don't want data, I want the story. We want the information that the data is telling us so that we can make those tweaks anywhere in the process that we might need to make.
Totally. And I think too, it's an interesting time right now because we sell forecasting. We have this historical AI engine that looks, back in time, says, here's the prediction of what's happening over the last, 9, 10, almost a year now, really, of this turmoil in the economy. Things have shifted, things have changed. Annie, kind of going into that, you've been here a short time. You've brought a lot of get it done attitude. Let's get excited. Let's change our mentality. Let's create a partnership. What are some of the ways that you did this, knowing that things are ever changing, things are evolving, the history doesn't always repeat itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. I brought that attitude. I think it was just sort of, it was very organic when I got here. Like there were things that we had to get done, right? I came in right as we were sort of launching or designing a new go-to-market. We were heading right into our new fiscal year. So we had to really quickly be able to stand something up that supported that go-to-market. And so, that get it done attitude was sort of out of necessity. And then once I started getting into Xactly forecasting and really seeing what it could do, that's what really brought the excitement, because I've never worked in a tool that is so agile. I came in, and like most revenue operations or operations roles in general, you have an idea of where you want to go and kind of how you want to get there. But technology can facilitate that, but in times it can also sort of hinder that, right? If your technology is limited. And what was so exciting with XF is that I didn't feel like I was limited. I mean, I think,
XF is Xactly forecasting, just to say that.
Yes, exactly. Forecasting. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, it was everything I kind of wanted to do. I was just being told, yes, we can do that. We can put this view in, we can customize it in this way. And, being able to do that is really exciting as a RevOps person, because so often we aren't able to do things like that. And then you have to go back to sales and say, nope, we can't give you that. And so being able to say yes to sales is a really exciting thing, because it also really fosters a healthy relationship between revenue operations and sales. So
Ryan also doesn't take no for an
answer.
answer.
Yeah. But it all sort of comes naturally, right? Like once you see what you can do and how it can make your life easier, how it can make, everyone that you work with lives easier, it's easy to get excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you look at these times right now, you could go in. I talked to SVP of sales yesterday, another SaaS software company. And it's like you can use data and history to go back in time to say, hey, this is what happened. But now you don't know what's going to happen. So you're creating almost a new history. And I think that's where, this team of Bayley has really come in to help me, is we want to start looking at data differently. Like we use other technologies to map out how well are you putting a map in place? Do you have, the plan to get the deal closed right within the system? We're a Vista company. We use Vista value selling. So how are we aligning to that? Because we want to get back to basics. And like when you think about basics, a lot of companies still do forecasting within spreadsheets. What is it, in your opinion, if a company's using spreadsheets to do forecasting, let alone comp, what are some of the shortcomings? What would you say, hey, this is the biggest thing you got to think about?
I mean, I would say it's tough, as you're well aware, the sales cycle happens across so many different tools and platforms currently. And if you're using a spreadsheet for forecasting, you're looking at one static metric, and that's what's informing your senior staff about what's going on, but you're not telling the whole story of what's happening. Not only that, like I'm worried about your RevOps team if you're still in a spreadsheet, because I remember that process from back at my time at Marketo, and it could get contentious, like if points of data change or things shift in Salesforce, like things are always moving and shifting. That's the beauty of being in a cloud environment, using something like Salesforce, and a spreadsheet it becomes a relic so quickly. Annie, I don't know if you've any thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could talk about this for hours, honestly. I love Excel for certain, data analysis, and it can be a really great tool. But if you're using it primarily for your sales forecasting, like Bayley said, like I'm really worried about your revenue operations team, because it's really clunky, right? Like you're going to have to, it's not real time. You're going to have to export data every time. If you're dealing with historical analysis, you can be pulling a ton of data, which, we've all, those of us that use Excel, have always had those frustrating moments where you have a gigantic file and it crashes, and you spend so much time just trying to get it open, trying to work within that file. That's a huge time suck, and honestly can affect morale. So I think, from a process perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then, like Bayley said, there's also the danger of like, you're only looking at one point of view. And, I've definitely had experiences where each part of the business is measuring different metrics in different ways. And so then when it all escalates, you're all talking, you're all telling a different story essentially. And you can't have a cohesive view of the business if that's what you're doing. So that's a huge pitfall of using something like Excel to do your forecasting.
Yeah, and I think, from a sales perspective, every month end, quarter end, I'm going through and leveraging our own tool, which I used to do in G Sheets of, okay, here's the deals, here's the high, medium, low values. Where's my range of numbers? I know and we've talked about this on the series before, from a sales perspective, what's the value of a forecasting tool, right? It's not always to go be, person versus computer. It's really to help augment that. From a RevOps perspective, though, what does something like Xactly sales forecasting do for you? How does that help you in your day to day?
Well, I think,
go ahead. Sorry.
we always jump in at the same time. I think kind of what we just spoke to, right, is like, if we didn't have it, what would we be doing? We might be using Excel. We might be using a tool that doesn't quite have the ability to customize to our business. And so that always brings more manual work. So if you aren't able to do it in the tool, you're doing it somewhere else. And especially with things like historical analysis or, just looking at certain metrics, you're probably going to do that in Excel.
Yeah.
If your forecasting tool doesn't do it
maybe
for you.
Think about it too from an angle of because there's always things that sales needs, right? How are you getting ahead of that from using a tool like Xactly, right? If you think about what I need, you've learned, you can learn a sales leader's mentality, what's their line of sight looking like for the next 3 months? How are you able to leverage a tool then to change that, make an actual impact to the data that you see or that you give out to the team?
Yeah, and like not just from your perspective, Ryan, but a tool like Xactly forecasting is actually like informing all of senior staff because of the ability we have to pull in those other metrics and tools from across the process. A pitfall of the spreadsheet is you've got the deal name, the metric, you might have some other information about the last meeting date. But in Xactly forecasting, it actually helped me onboard here pretty quickly because I was able to see the kinds of meetings, the kinds of calls we were having, the sentiment data pulling in, as well as like some momentum and activity data without drilling and digging into every single opportunity in our pipeline. So it's been able to help give me a clearer picture of what good looks like here and how do we help start replicating those things across cycles, across more opportunities after we're seeing what's working, tweaking what we might not need to be tracking any longer. Something that was true a year ago might not be true now.
Totally. Speaking of that, what are some of the key metrics you think RevOps team should be looking at?
One that is a tricky one to get to, but is highly important, and Annie actually really helped raise for us in that new view we're using for the go-to-market this year, is that in-quarter create and close. That's always kind of a mystical number in the realm of sales, and it can be really hard to predict. Like, we know it's out there. We know there's things that are going to come up and close in the quarter that we don't have visibility to, and that's somewhere where the AI and Xactly forecasting especially has been a huge benefit to us as a RevOps team to help not only guide you, Ryan, but inform the senior staff leadership as well.
Yeah, I think too, like I'm always looking at, is your pipeline clean? And we have built in, metrics to help our sellers make sure that they're keeping their pipeline clean within their Xactly forecasting view. So if you don't have clean pipeline, you're never going to have a realistic picture of your business, and you're not going to be able to call an accurate number because you don't truly know what you're working with. And then I'm always looking at win rate, average days to close, and average selling price. Those are the ones I think kind of 3 baseline metrics that you can use to really determine if your business is healthy. So is your win rate increasing? Is your average sales price increasing? And are you doing it in less time?
Yeah. I think go ahead, Bailey.
I was just going to say, and then, on top of that, like those are metrics we should be looking at always. And then consistently as a RevOps org, like where are we getting in our own way in terms of process? Where are there clicks or things I can remove that's in my purview anywhere across the process that sales and customers interact with?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we talk about these metrics, but it's not just on sales, right? To make sure those are improving. It's also on us as revenue operations to go in and make sure that, people are enabled to close out deals when they need to so that they can increase their win rate. We are removing barriers within the process so that they can have faster deal cycles and things like that. So it's definitely something that helps us as well as
Well, I
sales.
mean, I think one of the key metrics you all put in place as well within forecasting is looking at our risk, right? So grading it from a high, medium, low, because as you get towards the end of a quarter, it's always like, okay, well, what can we pull in that's of low risk in the next month to this quarter? So can you give a little bit more insight to when I say risk, what went into that, the methodology?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I really love that we've done in forecasting is set up a score, and we've been able to customize that score based on what we know about our business and where we want people to really improve, so we can kind of drive people in the right direction. And so within that score is sort of built-in risk identifiers, right? And so we've been on many forecast calls, as you know, where we'll go into next quarter's view and say, okay, we need to, we want to increase our number. We want to increase that call. Let's look at our low risk deals. And then what's really awesome is that you can look at that risk level and you can see exactly where that risk is coming from. So you aren't multi-threaded. You need to make sure that you're, interacting with higher level people in the business. You don't have your deal scorecard filled out properly or completely. And so you need to make sure you go in and do that. So what I love is that it's not just telling you there's risk, it's also telling you how you can address that risk and bring it down.
And it was great because we were able to leverage some of the same, tools and account information we use to plan territories. So we're aligning to our go-to-market strategy every step of the way. We can also, without asking the rep to do any data entry, we can look at the account and say, does this fit our ideal customer profile? And that helps weigh into our likelihood and risk as well.
Totally. I mean, I think that's one of it's looking at it from a couple different angles, right? Because there's the operational standpoint of how do we go and call the number versus what insight can a rep get of like, where's my actual risk in a deal? And I think that a lot of times when you're just looking at it from Salesforce opportunity screen, like, yeah, you can go in and you can see, okay, this is what the emails that were sent back and forth. You can listen to, recordings of calls and get sentiment analysis. But what do you do with that, right? How do you get more detail into what's actually happening? Um, so when we think about it, the next question I have is, how can a good forecasting product increase rep engagement?
Well, that's a good one. I mean, I think it gives them so much more than just a deal sheet or a view of their pipeline, what they're working right now. Like Xactly forecasting can tell them and help pinpoint what they're doing well and what's historically been going on for them in the sales cycles. And bringing all those tools together and into one view gives them the ability to have those comparisons on hand and see like where they should be applying more of their time and energy. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm completely aligned with you, Bailey. It's like our goal has always been to get, sort of this one holistic view within our forecasting tool that reps and managers and, all the way up to your level, Ryan, you can use to really run the business. So it's, looking at your business, but also there's so many opportunities that we sort of built in for coaching.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the Op 360 that we have built within forecasting, it really gives that view into everything that's happening. So being able to leverage some of that detail going into the account scoring, I think a lot of companies before, other sales leaders really want to go into deal backing and why a deal back call is so important. Well, while it is, in this economy, there's so many moving parts. Do you have any thoughts, Bailey, or any on like, because we changed that methodology a little bit here internally as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really key in the view. We have to have, that side by side hedging between like a rep and a sales director, a sales leader, so that those feedback conversations, like there's no avoiding them. They have to happen. If I mark something as commit, and Ryan knows I'm not multi-threaded and all that's highlighted and bubbled up within XF, it's not a bad thing, but it's a huge coaching opportunity for, Ryan or my sales leader, if I was the rep, for someone to tell me and say, okay, like, how is this going to happen knowing we have these risks? I think it brings all those conversations that are sometimes difficult to have in management relationships just to the forefront. And we all really embraced that culture of we're going to have feedback and it's going to be positive and negative and it's going to be all the time.
I mean, it is all the time. I mean, that's the one thing with sales and forecasting, right? It never quits. Once a quarter ends, another quarter begins.
Yeah.
So maybe give us some examples or tell us some of the best ways to align sales reps and the RevOps team.
Go for it.
Well, look, both you can give what you think.
You both get to talk. Yeah. Andy, go ahead.
I mean, I'm Bayley, you'll probably say something similar, but like, we're all driving to the same goal, right? We all want everybody to hit their number. We all want the company to make money. And so, that is a really easy starting point to align us. And then, I think something I really try to be cognizant of in my role in RevOps is you really want a partnership with sales. I think there are, some environments where there's sort of a more contentious relationship between operations and sales, because sometimes you feel like ops is coming in and telling you, you've got to do things this way. And as a salesperson, you're like, I'm just going to do what I need to do, to win deals. But as we kind of keep that as our focus, right, is that we are all working towards the same thing. We're all in the same team. And we all want to do what, it's our role to do to get us there.
Go ahead, Bayley. I know you have thoughts on this.
No, I mean, I'm completely aligned. Like, when sales wins, everyone wins. So we're aligned to that same goal. And if we can stay centered on that, if I, as an organization, if we have to introduce, a new policy or something that someone could interpret as restrictive or a rule, like, as long as we're clearly communicating the why and explaining the benefits, and as long as you and I are in lockstep, then I think that's such a key thing. Because to Annie's point, I've seen plenty of relationships between RevOps and sales leaders get contentious, or where we've been seen as like a roadblock or a speed bump, and it's like, no, I want to get you on the freeway. What?
You're Toby Flendersons, right? I mean,
I've been accused of that before. I think of myself more as like a Stanley. I don't know.
I mean, kind of reverse of that. What's your biggest pet peeve, between the sales and RevOps team that you don't think that either goes unsaid, or, this is a forum where you let it all out?
No, that's a tough one, because I mean, at the end of the day, like Ryan, I think we've had this conversation several times, like, I'm not in a closing role. Like, there's an appreciation I have to have for the sales motion and the sales process, for the pieces of it that I'm not doing, but I'm helping facilitate. So, I mean, sure, do I get irritated if there's some outrageous ask on a deal? Maybe. But it's always important to understand, the why behind it, or why that's coming up. And then, can identify those opportunities of, like, is that something we need to operationalize somewhere in the process, or what other things might look like this? And I think just, staying open-minded is key.
We're going to have to find who I'm going to have to figure out who your first SDR manager was and see what went wrong and why you chose RevOps instead of being an SDR. What about you? What about you, Annie? What's a pet peeve that you have?
I think I kind of think of that. I think, the most stressful time usually for revenue operations is during fiscal year planning or cutover, right? Like, that's when all the change is coming. Change is always hard. And so I think, we've said this plenty of times to each other, Bayley, is, all I ask is that people are open to change. And if there is something that isn't working, tell me why, so that we can change, we can make sure that it does work. And, like, we're not expecting to go into something getting it perfect every time. That's one thing I really enjoyed about, when we launched our new Xactly forecasting view in February, we took about a month to make small changes to make sure that it worked. And that it worked for you, Ryan, that it worked from your level all the way down to the rep level. So I think like that is the only thing, if I'm honest, that that will kind of get to me is when, don't complain for complaining's sake. Tell us what's going wrong, why, and then we want to help you fix it.
Yeah. And I guess if I were to like sum up RevOps, like into a Giphy, have you seen the Friends episode with Ross Geller and they're moving the couch and he's yelling pivot?
Pivot, yep.
That's RevOps.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought you were going to go with when he gets the spray tan and he gets two tens on the. Anyways.
I mean, yeah, that could be me, but.
Well, is there anything else that you two want to add? I mean, it's been a pleasure talking. I mean, we talk daily, so I get to talk to you. Everyone else gets to hear what you guys have to say. And it's really exciting because I do think that there's, it's not sales ops anymore. It's RevOps. And I think that's a key differentiation as well. So anything else, parting words before we sign off here today?
I mean, I guess just to that point, with it being called RevOps, I think that's something that organizations have to be cognizant of too. Like all the data that we get from forecasting and other tools, like we're partners of the finance organization. There's revenue in that title and that naming convention for a reason. A lot of that information that gets passed to financial planning and analysis teams that are pulled into modeling, those are hugely valuable things for them to be able to see and visualize in XF versus, the spreadsheet that would crash.
Annie?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I can say it better. I think I saw someone just said it's revenue marketing. And that was the only thing I was going to say is, we talk about how cross-functional we are. And yes, we do work with marketing because that's really the start of the funnel, right? And so we have to make sure that everything is making sense from that very beginning point all the way through to close. So like Bayley said at the beginning, cash to close is what we're responsible for. So
yeah. I think that RevOps has evolved a lot over the years, right? From your traditional sales ops to where it is now. It is cross-functional because you're dealing with so many different, on a daily basis, you're talking to marketing ops, you're talking to finance ops, you're talking to our controller, you're talking to me, fortunately. But no, if there aren't any other questions that are coming through the chat, I want to thank obviously both of you for taking the time out of your busy day to have this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
At any time, you're more than welcome back. Or maybe we'll get you back for episode 6 and we'll talk something else. And to everyone watching, thank you as well. This is, a fun little series that we have with Xactly Sales Hacks where we just want to have honest, open conversations. What's actually happening in the workplace? Because what you see in your organization, other people are feeling that. We're probably going through the same things. We definitely love seeing the interaction in the chat. Make sure that you hit that like and subscribe on the page to get notified of our next sales hacks, which will be coming out probably in about another month or so. And send us a note if there's a topic you want us to address. We've been in business for over 18 years now. We've seen it from sales comp, sales planning, sales forecasting, all gamuts of that from a sales execution perspective. So definitely let us know, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.